Ladies and gentlemen, I present filmmaker Terence Heuston talking about his film MADDOGGIN today. Terence, welcome to the show. Very honored to have you. You made an awesome film. You were nominated. Check it out. So Emily Monti, who was before Samara Howell, played it forward. She nominated Samara. Samara nominated Meredith. Meredith is deep in diapers. So she nominated you. So she skipped her turn, and we're both big fans of Meredith. You know her well, and she highly recommended you. In my limited interaction with Meredith, she is quite a quality human being. And so I knew before watching your show, I was in for a treat. MADDOGGIN brought me to tears, as I told you. I think it brought me to tears, and I'll stop talking in a minute, but I think it brought me to tears because, you know, the gang thing, look, I mean, we've seen that done, and a lot of people live that kind of life, and a lot of white boys in suburbia live a life of no choice too. And a lot of, you know, all different colors of the rainbow all over the world face a lack of choice and opportunity, and somebody else telling them who they need to be in this world and not being allowed or being supported to be who they need to be or who they are. And that level of soul crushing, and everybody can relate to. And that's why I cried, as well as I think we want to honor that your film is about gang violence, and a person who was a part of the film passed away shortly thereafter as a result of gang violence.
Yeah, one of our background actors, he was introduced to me through Fabian Deborah, who was the muralist on our film, and he also did a lot of technical advising. He's the drug counselor at Homeboy Industries, which is this famous organization that mentors former gang members into job skills and soft skills and all of those sorts of things. And so Fabian introduced us to Irvin, came out and he shot with us, and he was super sweet and super great. And then 6 weeks later, I got the call from Fabian that Irvin had been killed on his way walking to the bus to go work at Homeboy Industries. They don't know who did it. They just assumed that it was someone who didn't know that he had gotten out, or one of those. He was 19.
So he was murdered.
He was murdered.
Yeah, he didn't get killed. It wasn't a stray bullet. He was murdered, and somebody was after him as a former gang member.
Someone shot him 3 times on the way to the bus.
Yeah. On
his way to work.
Yeah, I mean, that's heart-wrenching. The kid's, he's 19. I mean, you know, there's nothing to say about that. And your movie is a really, you know, there's almost too much to say about it, right? And so that's, I think, why I was brought to tears, you know, because
I guess, I mean, for me, you know, being a white dude from the suburbs,
yeah.
I couldn't understand why a kid would join a gang, you know, on a meta level. It just didn't make sense to me. And so I thought, if it doesn't make sense to me, and, you know, I'm a pretty empathetic guy, you know, then I know it doesn't make sense to, you know, numerous other people. So I just decided that I wanted to go answer that question. Why does a kid join a gang? And on a practical level, you know, honestly, I had a coming of age feature script, you know, in terms of, like, you know, career stuff. I had a coming of age feature script. I could go make a short film about kids in the suburbs, and it would play the festivals, and it would be a dovetail to my feature script, whatever. And I'd already had, like, a previous short film who did well which had done well on the festival circuit. And then they just kind of die. And so you put all this money and all these time into these projects. And so I thought, you know, if I did something that was more about a coming of age story about these kids answering those questions, then the film could actually serve a broader purpose than just trying to advance my career.
That's awesome.
And so I was like, if I'm going to spend, you know, $20K or $25K, I think, you know, if you include without a box fees and festival stays and all that stuff, you know, it ends up being like $30K at the end of the day. You know, I was like, wouldn't it be better to put this $30K into something that could do some social good? And it has been gratifying that, you know, once we ended the run and all those things, that the film has been used by nonprofits, and I've had, you know, police organizations and all these other agencies reach out to me who use it to sort of train their officers and such.
Well, dude, so first of all, Terrence, you're the writer director of the film. It's super dope. I mean, it's a world that you don't know, you didn't come from, and to work with child actors or young adults is really challenging to do. And you did it masterfully. The acting is superb across the board. The adults are awesome. Everybody did a great job of acting. I mean, very authentic experience. The cop was great.
That's actually one of my favorite moments during filming. Is Lex Medlin he's actually really well known for a Lifetime show called Drop Dead Divas. I knew Lex from the commercial world because, you know, I still am. You know, I perform in commercials to pay the bills. That's how I paid for MADDOGGIN. And Lex has always been to me like one of the 10 best actors in the world. He's just one of those people, you know, in LA.
Man. He was, you know, he knew that character.
Yeah, but the best part was that night Fabian came to set, and he had a bunch of his like former gangbanger kids with him just to watch him because they wanted to watch us film. And I remember after just the walkthrough, the rehearsal before we started shooting, I turned to the right and Fabian was like, is he a cop? Yeah. like he was certain that Lex had to have been a cop. That's how good Lex is. I was excited.
That was fucking awesome. So one of the things, so let's get right down to the questions. I mean, on Play It Forward, we asked 3 questions. You know, the point of the show is to get as real and vulnerable as we can about the art making process and what it means to you, and to be able to bring attention to the inspiration that comes before. And you've touched on that already, certainly. You know, the first question is, why this film? And before I kind of
touched on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit about the whys, and then it comes down to how do you honor that world, being someone who's parachuting into it. So I did just a massive amount of research. I just read a ton of books. I just wanted to make sure that that I wasn't doing some cliche of this world, but I was actually trying to capture it for real. I also knew that I was gonna, you know, I knew at the end of the day that my dialogue was going to be shit. I knew that whatever my first draft of dialogue was going to be, it was going to be wrong. So for me, it was about laying down the story beats and getting the story beats in the dialogue right. And then I was really blessed that I had Eddie Ruiz come on, because Eddie saw the script and he loved it. Eddie was my producer, but he's from Boyle Heights, which is the world of the film. And Eddie was able to clue me in. He laughed hysterically, first of all, when he saw the slang that I was using, and he was able to clue me in on the slang. And he gave a really great note, which was what makes this gang leader attractive? You know, because when you watch, you know, I actually haven't seen that many gang films. Made a point of not watching them when I started the process, but very often they just make them scary. And why would a kid be drawn to someone who is just scary? And I think that one of the amazing things that Justin Nguyen, who plays the gang leader in the film, brought to it is that you want to hang out with him. He's just so fucking cool. You know, you realize that, you know, he's giving an extended family to children who don't have one. Either their parents are absent because they're working so hard, you know, trying to survive, you know, or for whatever reason, these kids are creating a new extended family for themselves.
That definitely came across, and it was a nice touch point in his character in terms of, you know, having the soft part where he, you know, acts the father role, and that was not lost on the audience. But in terms of, you know, doing this Digipops development, software development, right, I've gotten into the software world, and that's informed by this methodology called Agile. And Agile is informed a lot by the Japanese culture. So in the methodology, when you ask why, they have this system of asking why 5 times to get to the heart of the real why. So I want to dig deeper into that why. And so you said, you know, you said you didn't want to just make another movie to try to elevate your career and show your writing skills and a story that would be able to sell. You wanted to create a story that would do that and have some cultural impact, you know, and that's kind of, so coming on that and getting closer to your heart, and not just like, hey, why do you want to be a filmmaker? Hey, why do you want to make stories? But hey, why do you want to be a filmmaker? Why do you want to make stories? And why did you make this story? And how do you think this story, because you're in here, right? There's some kid that represents you, or all of these characters represent you, right?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
So somebody wants to be loved, somebody wasn't loved, somebody wasn't accepted. Like, so how does all that wrap up into, you know, who you are and the deepest why that you can connect to of making this movie?
That's very perceptive. And it's interesting because people would, I had like actors walk into the audition room, you know, people of color, and
I call them black like, people.
Black people,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I have a black guy walk in the audition, you know, and he's like, you know, wait, you're Terence? Because of course Terence is often a, you know, a black name.
Yeah, sure, right. Terence Heuston, man. You look, you should be like 6'9", dude. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just fucking no way. And truthfully, I believe this very, very, very strongly. And this isn't controversial, but people forget this as we sort of, you know, as identity politics sort of seems to take over our public conversation, is that inside we are all exactly the fucking same. Yeah. We are all the same.
Right.
And what Mad Dog is actually about, like, yes, it's in the gang world, but it's actually about kids who have no hope. Yeah. And it's about trying to create economic opportunity when you have no hope. And so when people would ask me, like, it's like, how did you know what it was like to be a Latino kid in the barrio? I'm like, you know, there's no difference between a Latino kid in the barrio and a white kid in the suburbs who's going to a good school who also has no hope.
Right. Now, I know what it's like to be hopeless and fucking lost.
I know what it's like to be hopeless. So my father, you know, and that's not to say that I just want to step back for a second. That's not to say that I didn't have tremendous privileges, and I can list thousands of them in ways that I have advantages over that kid in the barrio. But in terms of like the emotional truth of that experience is identical.
Sure.
My father was, I think my sister and I generally describe him as like the world's greatest dad, but really subpar in the fathering department. I mean, I was working to help put food on the
describe it. I get that. So he was kind of like the dad. Hey, let's go golfing, let's have fun. But when it comes to the deep stuff,
he had a bit of a drinking problem. He wasn't so great at paying the bills. So I know what it's like.
That's totally different. Okay, wow.
Yeah, so but he was insanely fun, and he loved us deeply and fiercely, and he was always present. So there were tremendous advantages to that experience and tremendous disadvantages to that experience. One of the big disadvantages was I was putting food on the table as a 15-year-old, or we wouldn't have eaten.
Or you wouldn't have eaten.
No, we wouldn't have eaten. Now that's a slight exaggeration because Dad somehow always found the way to fucking bum money. But I do know how to dig in couch cushions to find the change to eat.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, there's not a lot of 15-year-olds. But you know what? I guess we'd be surprised actually at how many 15-year-olds in the suburbs can relate to that. You know?
Yes. And so, you know, no one knew. And of course, you know, it was a horrible, awful fucking time that deeply scarred me when I was a teenager.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's a coincidence. You know, my wife was actually a refugee who came from Vietnam, even though you'd never know it because she came here when she was super young. And so I don't think it's a coincidence. Both of us understood what that struggle felt like. And that's and how we were able to be simpatico to become life partners, because we know what it's like to have those experiences. And I remember the day that I gave up in high school. Like, I remember the day that I gave up was I realized that I was never going to be able to afford to go to college. So why the fuck try? And I happened to be lucky in the way that tremendously lucky. I mean, like, win the lottery lucky. My mother, who had moved to Seattle with my stepfather, who I didn't have contact with for a while there when I was in high school, she ended up marrying my stepfather, who was a successful small businessman. When I was 16, I couldn't keep my father propped up any longer. I just broke. So I went
You
So
left.
I moved to Seattle so that I could parachute out of my life.
Yeah.
Because
Did
and
your
he
sister
died
go with
about.
you?
Like, my sister was older. She was 3 years older, so she'd already gone through that process. She had supported us when I was 12 by doing a paper route in the middle of the night, like not like the teenage paper route, you know, where you walk around your neighborhood. You know, like the filling the newspaper boxes in the freezing cold February Michigan weather at 2 in the morning, driving around. She got a driver's license. You're able to get a special exemption at the age of 14 in the state of Michigan.
That's fucking crazy.
Drive this paper route. Yeah.
Wow.
So she got worn out. And so she had left earlier, and then I had taken over caring for our dad.
Wow.
And you know, Dad cared for us at the same time. It wasn't that simple, but yes, I was keeping Dad on track. And when I left, I knew it was going to kill him, and it did. And so I was carrying all that guilt and all that shit. But the important part in terms of Mad Doggin is I had a 2.2 when I left Michigan. And I mean, I was naturally good at school. I had to work pretty hard to suck that badly. And the next semester I had a 4.0. Wow. Because when you're not faced with the stress of keeping an alcoholic parent on track or working or the various other ways that, you know, you have real life stress as a teenager, it's really fucking easy to get good grades.
Yeah.
And so I have tremendous empathy for these kids from Boyle Heights or from other communities where I know that there's this large segment of the population that largely votes Republican that believes deep down inside that these kids are not good as those kids in the suburbs. They don't see it as a connection between these kids have such higher challenges to achieve to just get to school in the first place, to then expect that they then have to get all A's. That it drives me crazy that when we talk about economic mobility and why the bottom quintile can't get to the top quintile and how much worse off we are than Western Europe, and people are like, well, if they worked harder, it shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to be a top 1%er in Boyle Heights in school to have a life of dignity or a life of economic opportunity. So that is the root of Mad Doggin.
Well, that sounds pretty deep. Thanks for sharing that. And that's a tremendously strong root that is evident in the picture. And it is a great piece of art. I mean, it's a great work of art on all levels. The cinematography, I give props to Daniel Ainsworth, the DP. Ainsworth, right?
Daniel Ainsworth.
Great
the way
job.
he pulled, I mean, you know, we were shooting on the 5D Mark II, and we weren't using, that was before the cinema lenses really had gotten there, and I couldn't have afforded to rent the cinema lenses anyways. And so when you're pulling focus on a still camera lens versus a cinema lens, you know, many of you will know this, some of you won't, but it's like, you know, on a cinema lens, you turn this and the focus is a certain distance. You turn here and the focus is a certain distance, but it's equal. On a still camera lens, you move this, and then it's completely unequal when you move the next inch, how far it focuses. And how he handheld some of those insanely long takes with still photo lenses. I'm in awe of Daniel. Really, really phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I think, you know, what I'm kind of getting out of that and I think what you and him have in common, and when you come from, you know, I think when you come from a background that you've obviously been able to overcome, I think it gives you a dedication and a perseverance that shows in everything that you do. And, you know, that really is that extra juice to rise to greatness.
Trying.
And keep doing it, man. You keep doing it. You're doing it. So listen, let's move right down to the next question.
Okay.
The next question is, well, I think we covered it, man. I mean, what did you want to say? I mean, you already said it. I mean, I think, you know, we all bleed red is kind of that. And I think we all can understand one another.
And I think that there was one other element to it, which is I got really tired of arguing around the Thanksgiving dinner table with certain Republicans in my family.
Yeah.
And, you know, who have that point of view that I just said, which is, you know, well, if people worked harder, if people, you know, bootstraps bullshit. And so I think a part of me was making this film in terms of see, it's not just bootstraps. like there are other things at work, other things at play. And if you don't take those into account, I don't know, I'm so concerned about how things are right now. Obviously, everybody is, especially in the arts community and in the major cities. Western Europe, like every single Western economy has better economic mobility than we do. I don't understand, and they all have better social welfare systems than we do. Like, so what is it that we're doing wrong that's preventing people from getting a step up on the economic ladder? I don't.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think correlates between the Republican thing and the not being able, and this idea of, well, if they just worked harder thing? Democrats have their own problems, certainly, but
of course,
what do you think, I guess, is the correlation there? Do you see one?
I think that people, I mean, God, this statement's just done all the time lately, and I hate the word, but I think people aren't aware of their own privilege. I think people aren't aware of how they started on third base or second base or first base.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I had the incredibly unique experience of, starting off at, first or second base, going back to home plate, and then getting to third, all without it being my efforts. So I got to start on third when I was 17, I got to start on third, and I saw how much fucking easier it was to succeed when you're on third base.
Yeah.
And I think that when I talk to libertarians, who have many economic philosophies that I respect, and I think that you have to listen to, I think that when you see it as an overall package, though, you have to either believe that either deep down inside, Latino and Black kids just aren't smart enough to compete or are naturally lazy, or you have to believe that your kids aren't very talented, because if you don't, let me step back for a second. When I have these arguments with libertarians, and they talk about the estate tax and such, I'm like, you've already given your kids private school. They've already, been launched with your financial backing. If you don't believe that they can compete at that point, I'm rambling now. I'm just talking politics.
No, I mean, you're not rambling. You're illustrating your point, and I think going back to the original kind of requests that I made and framing this show, is like trying to go deep and beyond the things that are commonly discussed, and really to identify what is motivating us to do the things that we do. And I'm looking at a man who is motivated to create a piece of art to try to change our culture, to try to add something to the dialogue to help us understand one another. And that's one of the most noble things that I can think of doing in this life.
Thank you. I think there's a running theme in a lot of my work, which is kind of an indictment of libertarianism, simply because my experience of how hard it was to succeed when I was in the bottom quintile versus how easy it was to succeed for my top quintile. And so I just want to see everybody else have that same shot in life. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect. Not everybody's going to get the same shot, but we can do a hell of a lot better in making sure that the best minds out of the kids out of the bottom quintile can elevate.
We can move the bar, just constantly move the freaking bar. It's an evolution.
And we can let the people who are on the bottom quintile still have a life of dignity.
Absolutely.
In a way that right now they're scraping by, that I just makes me sick.
Well, Terence, we're at the last question. The last question is, since making the film, what's changed for you?
Yeah. Big changes. So, I mentioned my wife earlier, who's a phenomenal human being. And so she entered residency. It's funny, I remember I was accepting this award at the NBC Universal, Film Fest. And there was, like 1,000 people in the audience, and MADDOGGIN was just really acclaimed there. And I remember standing at the front of the auditorium and thinking, this might be as high as it gets, meaning my career. Because I had a 3-month-old at home at that time, and a wife that was working 120-hour weeks in her medical residency, which is technically illegal. My wife's an extraordinary human being who wasn't going to cut corners, so she ended up putting in the work. There wasn't the bandwidth to be the dad that my father was, while being the father that I needed to be, with my wife working those sorts of hours. So I drove myself crazy getting a feature script ready and getting that script that I mentioned that I had on hand. You know, it got optioned, and I was on daycare waiting lists, and I just found that I was doing a really poor job parenting as I tried to do both these things simultaneously without a support system. And I was still the primary breadwinner for my family because my wife was in residency. So I needed to step back from storytelling and find a different path. And I'm still trying to figure out my second act. It's been a challenge from, I feel this passion for filmmaking, and it's been a challenge from, you know, my feature scripts aren't quite good enough or commercial enough. So I'm struggling with answers to these questions right now.
Well, Terence, I mean, certainly what's changed, you know, you're changing things, you've changed in a pattern of abuse, certainly, and that's changing the world and has ripple effects into the future. So that's, you know, the most important change that you can be doing, and you're dedicated to that, and that's awesome, and I definitely honor you for that. You know, what's reached a making about a group of young soon-to-be men, becoming men, that at the last moment they face a choice. You know, you've made that choice, right? Your film has continued. You both know the choices you made, and based on the choices that you've made in making it and birthing that work and kind of taking it, putting it into the world, in this art, what's changed for you internally, not just your career or where you're going to go or not go?
I guess the one thing that I don't want to lose sight of is the desire to make things better. So whatever niche that takes place, because I think the hardest thing in life is not getting defeated by life. You know, a lot of people get worn out by it and they lose their optimism. Going forward, I don't want to lose that sense of wanting to change the world or make the world a better place, because I think that as we get older, it's really hard to maintain that.
Terence.
Yes.
Thank you. It's been a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for showing Mad Dog. And it's very sweet of you to shine a spotlight on it.
Thank you, man. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave us a like and or a comment. It makes a big difference. Play It Forward is brought to you by Digipops, where we're building a community to put film and filmmaker discovery in your hands. Here, filmmakers and fans, the creative class, recognizes each other fairly and transparently through a community-curated film festival each quarter. It's coming soon. Thank you.